Hello, Internet! Today we're going to be doing a Node.js application. We're going to go through MySql, although it will be literally the most basic thing ever. We're going to have a single table database, so we have persistence with our to-dos. Obviously we're going to go through Node.js. We're going to be using JavaScript, which is obviously in Node.js, but we're also going to be using our own script with JavaScript DOM, so we can populate the page with the to-dos from the database. We are going to be using EJS, which is how we're going to template this. So we're going to have an index file that's going to have an include for the header and an include for the footer, and then we're going to separate each part of the app into different components that are going to be included in the file. Bit of CSS. The main CSS I'm going to use is Bootstrap 4. We're going to be looking at get and post requests. So how do we get data from the database and how do we post data from the database? Asynchronous functions. Again, this goes hand in hand with working with databases. So there's a lot of stuff that we're going to go into. So the very first thing we need to do is initialize the Node app. So navigate to your command line. I'm using iTerm. You can just use a standard terminal. It doesn't really matter. And either create a folder or navigate to the folder where you want to have your app. So I already have one on the desktop called TODO app. And in there at the moment, we just have a README file, which is the file you see in Atom at the moment. So in order to initialize a Node.js application, you have to type in npm and then init. Press enter, and it's going to run you through creating the package.json file. So the first thing it wants us to give a name to is the package. We're just going to leave it as the default TODO app. Version 1. Yeah, whatever. A TODO app. We don't really need to do any of this really. The only thing I'm going to change this entry point to server.js because I like server.js more than I like index.js or app.js, which are common things people do. Let's get rid of all this. Author Mr. Lee. There we go. Is this okay? Yes, okay. Cool. So now we have, if we look in the folder again, we now have package.json, and if we look at package.json, here we have all that sort of stuff we just went straight through. Nothing too interesting here. So we have initialized the Node.js app. Nothing will happen. We can't actually do anything with it at the moment because we don't have a server. We don't have any required modules. So we're actually going to have to set up server.js first. This is wrong. The reason we have to set it up is because we have no server. So we're going to say atom server.js. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say make directory called src and cd to src. Then we're going to say atom server.js. There we have a new file. And what we're going to do in this new file, I'm going to split this up so we still have our what we're doing over here, so we can sort of read from that at the same time. What we're going to do, set up server.js. So we've done that, but we need to start adding some stuff in there. But we need to sort of install the required modules first. Now, arguably, actually, I was right. We could do it this way. Doesn't really matter. So the way you install things in this is we're going to say cd back. We'll go back to the root of the directory we're in. So we've got the package and the readme file in there. And we are going to say npm. Actually, I'm going to usually say sudo because you sometimes get errors from permissions. So sudo install. And we're going to first install, let's install Express first. Type in a password. Wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. It's going to start installing. That's how you install it. So for all of these here, Path Express, MySql, Router, and Body Part are in EJS. I'm just going to do the exact same thing. So we're going to magic through the magic of video editing. We're going to cut out, and I'll have already installed all that, and then we're going to start putting everything together in the server file. Now all of the packages are all installed. We are going to now come back and set up the server, which I put in the wrong place again, like an absolute tit. This is really simple. So the way this is going to work, we have two files. We're going to have server.js and roots.js. These are just being separated because we can, and we're going to use the router to separate the server and roots.js. but they're basically like one thing, and you'll see what I mean as we go on. So we're going to require some of these modules. So the first thing we're going to require is path. Then we're going to say express, and you'll see what we're going to be doing with a lot of these as we go on. Constant layout. Now this I don't think you have to install, which I haven't because I never do, but I may have done in the past and just forgotten I've done it, so we may have to reinstall some stuff because I'm an absolutely hopeless coder. So he says as he makes a typo, roots require, and then we do dot roots. Wow. Then we're going to call our little thing app and call it express. So we create a new instance of express and we're going to call it app. Const body parser. The body parser module is really useful because it enables us to get information that the user has entered in, let's say, an input field, and then we can use that as part of our post request to a database, or we can use it for other things. So app set, we're going to create a folder called views as well, path.join, whoopsie daisy, directory name, views. Okay, and what this is doing is just basically saying we're going to have a template. So as opposed in a normal sort of web application, you have an index .html file, and what happens when you load a website, it's the server looks for that file, index.html or index.php or whatever. But what we're doing is we are going to use views to create a file called layout.ejs, and layout is then going to what we call include various parts to our thing. So we're also going to have a file called index.ejs, and the way it's going to work is, as opposed to having everything in one file, we're going to separate it out. It makes it much easier from a maintainability standpoint. Okay, so we need to set the view engine. So view space engine, this is where I spell engine wrong, and we're going to say EJS. Need to set some middlewares. Okay, wowzers, trousers, he can't spell. Layout. Then we also need some static paths that we're going to have. So we're going to have some other folders. So we're going to have path.join. Actually, I might only have one. I usually have two. I usually have one called public and one called files to sort of further separate stuff down. But given we already have one for views, I'm only going to use a public one. So we're going to say public and then do that. And then we need to say body parser, URL encoded. And we have to set for this version this. We could also set it as true, but we don't need to, so we're going to set false. But this will be fine. This will make everything work. Then app.use middlewares. We also want to use. We want to basically say whenever we load the main index, so just / we're going to say roots. What that means is when we go to our main server page, which for us it's going to be localhost on port, I don't know, 3535 or something like that. When we load that, it's like loading google.com. But what's going to happen is our app is going to load the roots file that we've yet to create. That's just what it's going to do. Otherwise, we'd have to have everything in this one file. More of this will come clear as we sort of go on. As I said, I'm going to use, what did I say, 3535. So we're going to set a port 3535. We could use port 8000. We could use 8001, 1000, whatever you like, whatever floats your goat. Although I think there is a limit to it, but I'm, like I say, an awful coder, so I don't have that off to hand in the old memory. We also want to because the thing is, as you make more applications, you're going to forget what it's running at. So when you launch the server, you're going to want to make sure you say what port you're running on, because you'll forget and you'll have to look in your code and you look like a right dick. Okay, so if we now, and nothing's going to happen, we're probably even going to get an error. If we go to cd src list, that's where the server is, just check. Okay, so it isn't working. I've done something wrong. I didn't expect it to work. I don't actually see what. Oh, I've missed a comma. I see. He's legally blind. He's missed a comma. I think if I run it again, it will still give me an error. Again, I'm missing commas. My God, this boy is hopeless. Jesus. Yeah, you did have to install Express Layout. So we're also going to add this in here and pretend that I always had this installed and that I hadn't made an error. So cd backwards, we're going to say npm install Express Layout. Yeah, I knew you had to install it. And again, sudo npm install Express Layout. This is what I was saying earlier, where you have to use sudo to install some things with npm. For some reason, there's permission errors all over the place. Let's clear this. It's nice and clear now. Okay, back to src, and let's see what happens now. I think there's going to be an error because we haven't actually got a roots file yet. Oh my God, he's a genius. There is an error because they're in the root file. That's exactly where we need to be, which means we've set up server.js, tick, shebang, shating. Then we're going to go and set up roots.js. Okie dokie, let's do that. So say atom roots.js and move it over here, and let's start doing roots. Okay, so we also have to get require express again. So it's almost like this is a separate, well, it is a separate file, and they're not as linked as I was saying they were earlier, like it's one file, but it does separate things out a little bit. This is also where we're going to need MySql. So we're going to connect to the database. Router. Watch me have not installed this. I think I have. Oh my days, he can't spell. Express.router. Okay, so we've got all that. So now we can start doing stuff with everything else. I don't think there's anything we have to do immediately to get the... Oh no, there is one thing we have to do immediately to get the app working actually. We have to say router.get that / thing, and we're going to say comma, remember the commas because I didn't remember them last time. Res this thing, whatever that is, res render, and we're going to say index. So we're going to render that index file whenever we are on, whenever we load localhost port 3030 and we have server running. So that should work. There's a few things we have to do. So if we go to our terminal, we are going to see what we've got. So we need to make a directory. We need to make public. We need to make ones called views. And we're next going to cd interviews because we're going to start with the templating. Okay, so we've set up roots.js. Shating. We are now going to set up layout.ejs. Okay, this is where we're going to have all of our wonderful, 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 wonderful includes in there. So in the views directory, let's go ahead and create that file, layout.ejs. This is what the template looks for when we, EJS looks for layout.ejs. My God, he can't speak. Okay, and we're going to use includes. Now, includes, if you're familiar with PHP, PHP has includes and they're really great. And this is the way we're going to use includes. But this time it's EJS, and not PHP. So this is going to be a very strange file because it's not actually going to have anything in it itself. All I'm putting in it is include these other files. You might think, well, why do this? Why not just have the index file as layout? Well, the reason is I want to easily change things. That's why. We could do it with the index, but like I say, it looks for the layout. In terms of me looking for where the code should be, I expect things to be in the index. That isn't going to be in layout. It's just the way I've always done things. So you might want to do it in a different way. But now we have layout.ejs. We're now going to, we don't need that anymore because we're going to create index.ejs. Oh, he spelled it wrong. Oh, there's something wrong with this boy. My God. Index.ejs. There we go. Okay. We can also tick that off. Shutting. What we're going to say? Well, in index, what we're going to have is we're going to have our container. We're going to have a header for the page. We're going to then include some components, and then we're going to close the container. That's literally it. The footer, I don't think I'm even going to put much in the footer, but it could be useful for later on if you wanted to further develop other parts of the application. Actually, all I think I'm going to have in the footer, which is going to seem very odd, is I'm going to have body. I'm going to have the closing body tags and the closing HTML tags. Really weird. The reason I'm going to do that is because at some point we might want to switch out index and the main content, but we don't have to necessarily switch out what we have in the footer. So I'm at the moment just keeping everything separate. So all that's going to be in index.ejs is div, id, container. You might want to call it wrap. You might want to call it whatever you like. You might want to call it Sharon for all I care. So to-do app. There we go. Create H1. Then we are going to have some more includes, and this time we're going to have include some components. You don't have to. It doesn't have to be called components. We're just going to have a directory called components with our components in it. Sort of makes sense. Again, you can be free. You can break these rules that I'm setting forth that aren't really rules. I've made them very loosely and said they're explicitly not rules, but you might take them to be rules, in which case be a maverick, break the rules if you feel like it. So we're including there, basically we're going to have like an input for the add to do, and we're going to have a table. Why would we do that? Well, again, it's just to make everything modular. We can switch things out. You might want to have, instead of having a table, you might want to have a list, because a to-do list makes more sense than a to-do table. But I like the idea of a table because there are several things that many to-do apps do that they don't include. So, for example, I might want to organize all my to-dos by priority and by table. It's not table, sorry, by list. So you might have a shopping list. You might have a list of enemies you need to kill. You need to have a list of people who you must avenge. You might want to organize this in a sensible way so you can see what you need to do by priority by each of those lists as opposed to having separate lists. And I think a table would do a better job than would a simple list. And I like to put a comment here. So div id container, or in your case it might be div id Sharon. There we go, and that's all we're going to have in index. So it's very, very simple. And you can see how it only has really 5 lines of anything, and it's going to be very easy to change things when we need to, especially if we have multiple pages along the app. So we're not thinking about this app so much in terms of what we can do with this app, but the way we're designing this is more of a design pattern to enable us to design other things that could be bigger, scalable, and it just stands us in good stead, really. So next on the list is header. Header, we're going to be using Bootstrap in the header for the CSS as I mentioned earlier. We're also going to have our own little custom CSS file that we can make some small tweaks to. But I'm going to leave most of everything to you lot. So header, all we need to really do is say, I think you have to say doc type HTML, but I'm going to break the rules. I'm just going to say HTML. I'm going to say head, body. And then in between there, we're going to have our little scripts. And you might want to change this. You might want to have you might want to separate it differently. You might want to say, okay, look, I'm going to have my index is going to include the header. You might want to do that. You don't have to, but we can do it in any way we like. We're all free. So what do I want to do? Well, I'm going to get the bootstrap script files. Wowzers trousers, that was clever. They just appeared from nowhere. It's like there was some pre-planning involved. Right, so we've got, this is what we have. We have Bootstrap, what is it, 3.3.7. I don't know if that's the latest one, but it seems to do the trick. Then I'm also, again, thinking ahead, we're going to create another style sheet. So rel style sheet. We're going to say href, and we're going to say css style.css. I think we have to close it like that. I'm going to double check. No, we just close it like that. Whatever. Another script tag. In fact, I'm just going to copy this one, which I should have done in the first case. Copy this, and we're going to have, it's going to be called .js/javascript.js. Oh my god, he can't type. That's what we're going to use to sort of populate our to-do list with things from the database. We'll come to that shortly. We haven't got the footer yet. Again, another thing we need to do. So let's go atom footer. And like I say, this footer is going to be well simple. It's almost going to be pointless. This is the footer. Get ready. Body. HTML. The reason you might want to have separate footers because I might want to have a load of stuff, a load of content that's consistent across all pages. For us, we don't need to, so we don't really need this, but we're having one anyway. You only live once. Let's make a footer separate. Next thing we need to do is make that components file that we mentioned earlier. So it is, where are we looking? Let's close some of these out. It's here, components, in the index file. So components. What we're going to do, I'm going to make sure I spell components right because this is where I won't spell components right, even though it's quite an obvious word. cd components, and now we're going to start making the new thing. So we're going to say add TODO.ejs, and all we need to put in this is we're going to put in one form. So we're going to say form, going to give it an ID, and we're going to say add form, add to do form. Maybe, yeah, we'll do it like that. So action is really important, / add to do. Now, that action is going to be in our roots thing. So we're basically going to have a little thing that says router dot, in this case it'll be post, and then it's going to say something along the lines of add to do. We'll get to what it actually is going to do shortly, but get rid of that because I'm going to show you what this looks like when we finish doing these next two bits. So method post, again, that's so we can send data. The closing tags, the form. When you can type, I've really not typed very well today. Wow. Then we're going to have an input. Type is going to be text. Name is important because when we're getting the value of the input, we need to use name and not ID. Very important because when we're using body parser uses name, not ID for these inputs. So it's just something to be very aware of because this is this is what people spend hours trying to figure out what they've done wrong, and it's usually they put name, they put ID, sorry, as opposed to name, so they could have just done that, but they needed to do that. Okay, you can have an ID and a name. There's nothing stopping you doing that. It's a free country. It's a free world. So that is all we need to do for the add to do EJS. So that's going to be when this file is loaded and rendered, that form is going to be here as opposed to having this include thing. So the next thing we need to do, you guessed it, is to do the to-do table. So let's say to-do table.ejs. Bring it over. We're going to create a table, as you would well imagine. I'm going to call it table. T-head, table row, T-head, scope. So this is from what I'm typing in now, the scope bit. This is from Bootstrap. Bootstrap has nice tables already defined, so we don't really need to do our CSS for that. Again, table row. Let's do a table, close the table head. Then we need to do the body of the table. Give it an ID. We need to give it an ID. Why? Because when we're using JavaScript DOM to populate this table, we're going to select element by ID. Okay, and we are going to leave this nice and empty. Yes. And then we're also going to have this form down here, which you might not get. But basically what we need to have is we need to have a way of telling our application when we have completed a to-do. And the way it will work is we are going to call complete to-do with ID 121 or whatever the ID is. Let's say it's 121. And that way we send the correct to-do to the database and update it to say that it's completed. If we used a link, let's say we had a to-do was equal to a link and it was a href. Well, href is by definition a GET request, but we are looking to post something to the database with this. So now complete to do, the second / is important because the root is going to be / ID, and we're going to have an ID, and you'll see what's going off there. So we're going to say method, I'm going to say post again. And this form is not actually going to be visible. There's no visibility of this form whatsoever. It doesn't really matter too much. It's just so we can have that action complete to do. And the next thing we need to do, just one final thing, we need to close the table off. There we go. Now we should actually be able to run the server and we should actually get some output. But first let's tick off these things we've done. We've done that. We've done that. So let's see if it runs. There may be an error. We need to come out of components and out of that. And we need to run server.js. There may be an error. There is an error, which we'll sort when we get to it. We'll do the database bit now. We'll sort this. Yeah, we'll do the database. So, to do the database, we need to have already installed MySql. I'm not going to go through that here because this video will get way too long and it's already very, very long. So, we're going to go straight to MySql, and I will have this script in the GitHub, so you can do this really simply, but you don't have to do it in the way I'm doing it. You could even use something like MySql Workbench, which is a great application to do this, but we can just do it from the command line. So say bin and then MySql, user root, and I have a password, so we're going to put in a password, which is, yeah, okay, so now we're in MySql. So now it's got the MySql and then the greater than or less than sign, whatever that one is, I never know. We're going to create a schema. And we're going to be well creative about this, and we're going to call it to do. We need to use backticks, not quotes, not these little things, not these. We need to use backticks, not a clue why. Colon. Okay, so we've created a schema to do. Then we need to say create table backtick to do dot backtick dot to do's. So this is really poor naming. To do's dot to do's. Sounds sort of funny. And we're going to start creating stuff now. So we're going to create. We need a primary key. So in a SQL database, we have a primary key, and that's how we identify the entire row. The way we're going to think about this, or you don't have to know too much about it at the moment, but we are basically defining the columns. So in Excel, the spreadsheet, you'd have A, B, C, D, and so on. You know the alphabet, I hope. What we're doing now is we're defining those columns, what we can have in those columns, how those columns work. So we're saying the column is called to-do ID. It's going to be of the type int, so it's going to be an integer value. We're going to set it as not null. We're going to set it to auto increment. What that means is when I add something to the database, I don't need to add an ID, it will do it for me. Okay? And we're going to set this to the primary key, but we do that last in these scripts. Okay? So to do, I'm going to set it as medium text. This might be too much for it to do, but it doesn't really matter. It's a very small database. So then we're going to say complete, and we're going to say tiny int. A tiny int is basically a Boolean value, not null, because we have to know is it complete. And we're going to have the default value as 0. Date complete. This is another one we don't actually have to do anything with when we update our database. We're going to have the database do it for us. So we're going to have a date time. We're going to say null on update current timestamp. What that means is when we add something to the database, when we add a to do to the database, it's going to have this column, date complete, is going to have no value. But when we change anything on that row, we're going to add the current timestamp. Why are we going to update anything? Well, the reason is because when we update a to-do, the only reason we're going to update it using our application is to check it off as done. That's how our application is going to work. Then we need to also, we don't need to actually do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. We're going to have list. And I'm going to leave this lot for you lot to implement. So you can have a bit of fun doing this. List. Actually, we'll make it 85 characters in case you want to have a longer list. Now we need to say primary key. So this is an important thing we have in a SQL database, a relational database. We have primary key. We're going to set that to do ID. Hopefully I don't get an error now. We didn't get an error. This is miraculous. I'm amazed. I always get errors when I type that sort of stuff in. So we have the database working. Well, at least we have it set up so we can tick that off. Shitting, and that's going to annoy me. That's going onto a separate line. So we're going to do that. Then we now need to set up JavaScript to present data on the page with JavaScript DOM. This is where we are going to get some asynchronous requests, and we're also going to get stuff from the database. We do have to do some other stuff as well, but we're going to do that afterwards. It's real simple. So remember, in our header we set up a file, we called it roots.js, and let's go to our terminal, come out of SQL. We don't need to do that. We need to go, we can get rid of that. We can go to, we need to check it. Did I make public? Yeah, I made public. So we're going to make one called JS. We're also going to make one called CSS while we're here. Then we're going to cd to JS, atom javascript.js. Okay, what we're going to do now is we are going to create a function called getToDos, which we're going to call as soon as this script is loaded. You could do it where we use jQuery because we're using Bootstrap, so we could use it. So we could say document on load, when it's ready, load this. But I don't think I'm going to have a problem here, so we're not going to do that because I can't be bothered. I'm lazy. So function getToDos, he's already gone wrong. He's already off topic. Here we go. And you may recognize this code. We've done it before on this channel. XML, HTTP, request, then request URL is going to be /get-todos. This is going to be defined in the routes.js file again. So as we had with the complete to-dos and the other stuff, we're going to define it in routes. We haven't done any of that yet. It's just something to be aware of. This is how it's going to work. Because what we can do here in request URL, we could just literally put todos.json, and we could have a file, a JSON file with all our to-dos in it. But we're not going to do that. We're going to get it from a database. We're going to deliver it in the JSON format, and then we're going to put it into a table. So request, we're going to open the request as a GET request, and we need the URL as well. Then we need to specify the response type, which I've already told you. It is JSON. Oh my god, he can't type. Response type is equal to JSON. Then request, what we're going to do next, well, we're going to send out a little request, so we call the send function. This is where it's asynchronous. So remember we said that in the concepts that we're going to learn about. An asynchronous function means that what this is going to do is we've sent the request, then when the request comes back, we're going to run whatever we have in here. So we're going to call another function basically. It won't call that function until we get the response from the request. So say var todos request is equal to, todos is equal to request.response. So that response we get. And then we're going to call a function which itself is going to call a function. So print todos. So let's create that next function which we're going to call print todos. What this print todos is going to do is it's going to run a for loop, which is going to call the next function. That way we'll be able to change stuff easy. Okay, and it won't make the code too difficult to read. So let's say we do for var I in todos print to table todos.I. That way we just sort of separate the for loop out from this next bit of code, because it can get quite spaghetti like if we do it that way. So we're first going to get like a table. Remember I said we were going to do that. We're going to get document, get element by ID, todo.table. Then we're going to say, you know what? I've changed my mind. We're doing it this way. We're going to have it in one function. I'm going to live dangerously, go against my own principles. Okay, we're going to do that for var I in todos, and we're going to say to-do ID, and we need to know what this is going to respond with. But remember, we had our when we created our database, we created something called the key was called to-do ID. So we had something in there called to-do ID, and that's how it's going to be responded to. The JSON file that's going to come back, or the JSON response, is going to have objects in it. One of them's going to be to-do ID, and it'll be like this. Or actually, it'll be like this. To-do ID, and then we'll also have, let's say, complete, and that will have. That's how it's going to be responded to. So we can simply access everything here like that. Okay, so that's how that's going to work. Okay, let's run through this. Go to do. Now we need to get the to do. So again, this is really simple. I'm just going to say, because we called it to do in the database, so it's going to come back as to do. For row, this is where we create an element in the table. So we create, oopsie daisy, create element, and we're going to create tr table row. Then we're going to create a cell, which is going to go in to the row. Because what my thoughts on this was that we could, as I've mentioned, we could create a greater to-do list application by adding multiple parts of the list to it. So instead of having like one to-do list that we tab through, we would have one list that you can reference all your lists from, and you can then turn bits off and on. Doesn't really make much sense what I just said there, but in the future I'll come around and do a better video of this. Why did I do that? We're creating a button next. There's something wrong with this boy. Do this. Do var to do cell document create element, and we're going to say td. This is the to do button. Why did I type button? I must have been thinking ahead. Very strange. And then this to do button is very important. This is how we're going to reference that form we made earlier. If you remember the complete form that I said wasn't actually going to do anything, it wasn't going to be visible. Sorry. Say set attribute. It's very useful. This set attribute method is very useful because you can set things that aren't necessarily supported by JavaScript DOM. Okay, so we're going to say complete to do plus to do ID. Remember how I said, yeah. And what this is going to do, we're going to create a function called complete to do, pass the ID, and then we're going to use that to route to the server and to the database. And you'll see all that shortly. We'll set the inner HTML of the button to do. So our to-do list is going to be a table that has buttons in it, because links don't really work very well for the way I want to do things. We're then going to do cell dot append to do button. Then we're going to append the cell to the row. So row append to do cell. And then we're going to append the row to the table. Okay, then we're going to create that complete to do function we just mentioned, complete to do. And you notice here that I'm writing in inconsistent case. I'm writing camel case over here. I'm doing this over here. This boy can't code. It doesn't really matter as long as we know what's going off. Form. So we're going to get that form that we were on about earlier. Document get element by ID complete to do form. And we're going to say form.action is equal to form.action. plus the ID. This is very weird because I've already put the form action in there. Like theoretically, I could have had the form action empty and not put it in the HTML, but I put it in the HTML. So if I was looking, well, not the HTML, the EJS that's going to get converted to HTML, just so if I ever needed to debug it and it got bigger, we'd know at least what it did and what route it called. We wouldn't necessarily know it came to this function, but we'd soon find that. And then we're going to call form submit. So when anyone clicks a button, it's going to call complete to do with the ID, which is attached to each individual button, the ID of each to do. Then it's going to submit here. That's going to go straight over to the database with the routes we're just about to define. Okay, so we're all gravy now with the main JavaScript. And all we need to do now is sort out the routes on the router, sort out that pesky little error that came up when we tried to run it earlier. But we're taking a flyer. We're going to write the code and then see what happens. We can also tick off that that's done. So now let's go all the way over to routes.js. There's also another thing, and I think this might have even been the error. We need to say module exports router. I think that might have caused the error that we had earlier with Node.js. So if I say we're not even in Node, so I would say cd back to directories. Yes. Then we say node server.js. Yeah, that's it. So mod. It's got to be it. Yes, so now the app is running at localhost. So let's go to localhost. We're going to go to there we go. We have a to-do app. It's not very well formatted yet. We haven't got it in a container, which is why we need the CSS. That's why we gave the container ID container, or maybe we called it Susan, like I mentioned. You should do that. That'd be good. So that works. So that's running. So Control C on a Mac to close that. Not Command C, Control C. So that's how we exit out of that. So, well, let's go through. Let's figure out what we first need to do. I think the main thing we really need to do first is to get the connection. A word of warning. MySql has a limited number of connections that you can make. I think it's either 100 or 500 connections you can make simultaneously. So if you were making this for, let's say, a small business, you were going to create this little to-do app, or you were creating any Node.js app, then what you would need to do is make sure that when you call a connection, you only call it when it's really necessary, i.e. if you log a user in, then you create a connection. You don't create a connection every time you go through a route. So for example, let's say this router.post, when someone calls that an answer to do, we don't create a new connection to MySql. Or you could and then close it. The way I found to be more useful is to just create one connection and then do things later on. For password, because I'm logging in as root, I like to live dangerously, as I've mentioned. We're just going to put pass, we'll put that as a variable, and I'll put that in when we run it. Database, to do. You don't have to put database there, because you could just put, when we do a query, you could just say use to do colon and then select from to-dos. You could do that if you wanted to. You don't have to. We're going to do that. And when we load this file, all we're going to do is we're going to say const con is equal to get connection. Okay. Just going to do that. And then I'm also going to do this. So I got pass equal to password. We'll put password there. There we go. Wunderbar. That is good. I like to have in router, I like to have my get requests organized together and my post requests organized together. So we're going to start with get requests, even though I have start the comment. So Oh, we also need to move this because I'm organizing the GET request and everything. So we're going to do this. I've just, the boy's crazy. So put the GET request here. This is the main thing when we load the app. So when we load this page, we render index. So we get the layout, we then render it all together and render the index. So we need to have a thing that gets the to-dos. Do you remember when we created a JavaScript file over here? We created this thing and we said request URL was get to-dos. So that's what we're doing now. We're going to get the to-dos. So we do rec, res, big fat arrow, and then we say query, and we're going to say select that. So basically that means select everything, select all rows from to-dos where complete is equal to 0. Now theoretically we don't have to get everything. In fact, it's inefficient to get everything. We could say get to-do ID and to-do, but we don't have to. Because I can't be bothered. It's too small of a database to actually bother with that sort of thing. So we're going to use an asterisk instead. We're going to be very lazy. Then we're going to say const, so we're referencing that connection we made earlier. And we're going to say query string, pass that in, and we want to get back the error, if there is an error, rows fields. Well, I don't really think I'm going to use fields. If we get an error, always important to do this. What I like to do is I like to console log, and the console for Node.js is not the Chrome console. So if we go to Google Chrome, it is not this bit of the console here. It is this bit. When we have the server running, we'll get a console logs to here. Just a little thing you might not get if you haven't done anything sort of server based before. And what I do is I'll say fail to query, and then I'll say I'll use the @ sign because I'm hip. I just used the word hip. Someone shoot me in the head. And then I want to pass the error as well, just so I know roughly what I ballsed up on. Okay. So if there's an error, we're going to log that. We're not really going to do anything else because why bother? Well, the reason you'd bother is because you want to keep everything running. But because I like to live dangerously, as has been a central theme of this, we're going to just console log, get in database, @ sign, again, get to-dos. This just makes it easier when you're trying to figure out where you've gone wrong. You could also pass through, like, let's say the ID that you got, but we're getting everything here, so it's not really appropriate. Res, so res stands for response. Say JSON, I'm going to pass the rows in as JSON. Which means now, we actually have no to-dos in the app, so I can't show you what it would be like yet, so we need to add some to-dos, and then we can do that. But the way we add to-dos is we need to first have a post request for add to-do, which I started here. Here's when I started earlier. So again, rec or res. These are also asynchronous as well. That's how all this works. And what we need to do here when we add a to-do is we need to say to-do and then rec, so request. We need to get the body and we need to get that add. Do we call it to-do input? I think we call it to-do input. I'm not going to check. I'm living dangerously. Query string is going to be insert. Oh my god, that was the most ridiculous typing ever. Into to-dos. To-dos is the table. So we have the schema to-do, and then we have a table. A table is like a sheet in Excel. To-do. So if we're going to put in loads of different variables, we're going to do that. So we're going to put in the to-do values, and then we're going to put in a question mark. Okay, and the way we're going to pass this is we're going to say con query string, comma, square brackets, to do, because we've called it to do over here. And then same as last time, we're going to say error rows fields, again another little square bracket, and then if error, go all the way down, and we're going to do the exact same thing again. I'm going to console log this little cheeky little bit of code, but I'm going to say add code there. There we go. Failed to not insert. And maybe I want to also add the to do, because if I do want to add the to do, so I want to say to do plus that. The reason I want to do that is because one of the problems you may come across is the problem I mentioned earlier, where this doesn't work. So I haven't got it open. Let's say we had we'd put this as the ID of the input and not the name of the input, if you remember from earlier. Well, this would come back as undefined, and we would know that because we'd console log to do, and we'd know that it'd come back as undefined. We'd be easily able to narrow down what's gone wrong. And again, if there is no error, all I'm going to do is I'm going to say console.log at /add to do plus add to do plus to do add plus, oh my god, lots of pluses added. There you go. And then we want to redirect to wherever we came from, or in the case of this, because we're only on the index, we're going to redirect to the main page. So we're going to go add to do, then we're going to go back here and re-render the index. Okay, so now we can actually add some to-dos to our to-do database, and we can get the to-dos. What we can't do is say whether a to-do is done yet. So if we go over here, start the server, node.server, there's no password, so obviously I'm going to put in a password, and then we'll run everything. So we'll do that. So run it. There we go, the app's running again, and go over to Chrome. There we go. Refusing to add our style in the thing. So many things we've done wrong here, but we'll sort that when we come to it. If I say, let's watch some dang memes, press enter, it will add it. The reason nothing's shown up is because there's something wrong with the way I've done JavaScript. I can see I've spelt it wrong because I'm an absolute idiot. So let's go and find that error, which will be in head. So we need to go, so we can see here, look, as well, getting distracted. It's failed to insert this because we have an error in our syntax. So we need to sort that. But we'll get around to sorting that. We'll do that. There's a lot of stuff we've actually got to sort. So, okay, we're in the header. I have spelled JavaScript wrong. JavaScript. There we go. Next, let's quickly sort that SQL error that we've just seen pop up. So we'll go to roots. Oh, it's right there. I put insert intos because I'm an utter fool. Let's restart the app, see what happens. Go over here. Let's watch some dank memes. Okay, there we go. We've got a button. It says watch dank memes. That's one of our to-dos. Let's add another one. We need to also add the CSS, so we can do that. And look, now we have two to-dos. And what I want to illustrate here is that this app is persistent. So if I close this now, close the server, refresh the page, it's going to get me an error. Come back, restart the server. It's all back. So what we should do next is complete a to-do. So we're going to start off in much the same vein we started off previously. We're going to say complete to do, but we're going to say this time we're getting a bit tricky with it. We're going to say complete to do / ID. Okay, and then we're also going to make sure I have that second bracket, and then we'll say res. Oh my god, you know what's coming. Here we go. The difference is now we're going to say const ID is equal to params, which I can never spell, params, there we go, .id. And what we then want to try and do is we're going to update the to-do. Okay, so const query string, we'll say update to-dos, so that's the table. I'm going to set the row complete equal to 1. Essentially we're saying true. 1 is equal to true, 0 is equal to false. If you remember, when we create a to-do, we have 0 in the complete as the default, which means false, it's not complete. Now we're saying it is complete. And then we're going to say where to do underscore ID is equal to question mark. Okay, then we say con query. You're probably seeing the pattern now that we're doing the same sort of thing over and over again. It's very simple to use Node.js, so hopefully you'll be able to see your own implementations of things you would be able to do if you were making this. Again, we're going to say error rows fields, and we're going to say big fat thing. I'm going to say we'll copy this. We'll say failed to complete to do at complete to do. That might be a bit obvious that it's there, and we're not going to have to do. We're going to have ID. To do ID. There we go. Okay. Then we're going to say, assuming it goes right, because I haven't put if. I haven't put an if statement. What an absolute tool I am. My God. That. Come out of there. Whoopsie daisy. Backwards. Wow. Okay. That's all gravy. This console doesn't go here. It goes here. Console.log. And we're going to say at / complete to do. What do we want to say? Completing to do with ID. Pass in the ID. Do ID. There we go. And then what else do we need to do? Well, we need to res. The response needs to redirect us to that index page again. Okay, so we've set up routes to get the data. We've set up routes to add to-dos, and we've just added to complete to-dos as well. So this is a fully working application now. Go to terminal. Oh, okay, we have something wrong. Let's try and figure out what it is right now. Live on air. Okay. Unexpected string in the bagging area. I wonder what I've done. Aha, it's the thing I did earlier. No commas. There we go. Not pausing for breath. There's no commas. There we go. So that now works. So we could add CSS, but I'm going to leave that to another time. Oh, we have an error. Reference error. To-do ID is not defined. Ooh, that is very interesting. Now, it's going to give me the same thing. To-do ID is not defined. Getting database from database, to-do ID is not defined. Okay, so let's have a look here. Let's have a look-see. Inspect the button. Complete to do ID. So this is where the button says on click complete to do, and it has 2 in there, which is exactly what we do in that JavaScript file. So we say complete ID, and then it says complete ID done. I wonder what we've done wrong. I'm gonna pause and we'll find out. Okay, your boy sorted it. It's all good. I don't know why I've done this, but for some reason I've defined ID here as ID, and then I've defined it everywhere else as to do ID. So all we need to do ID, and let's double check. We're gonna say, there we go, it's running. So that might not mean it's not working, but let's try. There we go. So it has completed a to do. There we go. And let's say next we'll go and watch some dank memes. It's completing all the to-dos. It's all working all well. So all that remains to do is say thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. If you want to see more, please subscribe. And if you have any questions, leave a comment and I will answer them as fast as humanly possible. I don't know what that was at the end. I should have ended on a much stronger note. I do apologise. Goodbye.